My name is Tonya Allen. I have the pleasure of serving as the president and CEO of the Skillman Foundation. It's a 60-year-old private foundation focused on children in the city of Detroit. The Skillman Foundation makes investments in nonprofit organizations to improve the lives of children in the city of Detroit. Over the last 10 years or so, we've been focused on improving high school graduation rates for children, as well as improving the neighborhoods and the conditions in which they live. And as a result of those investments, we've seen graduation rates go from 67% to 82%. We've also seen crime decrease in those particular neighborhoods by as much as 40% on certain measures. So we're really excited about the work that we've been able to do, particularly because we believe that they are proof points that we can improve Detroit and that Detroiters are resilient and that they can get their hands dirty and make a difference. The Skillman Foundation was founded by Robert and Rose Skillman in 1960. Robert Skillman was a 3M executive, and he moved here to Detroit to create the branch of the company here and to break into the auto industry. His claim to fame was that he basically identified the man who invented waterproof sandpaper, which was extraordinarily important to the auto industry. Rose Skillman remained here after his death, and she invested in children. She really cared about disadvantaged children a great deal, and as a result, left her wealth to the children in southeastern Michigan. And our trustees have focused on Detroit because Detroit is the epicenter of our region. The Skillman Foundation is a $500 million endowment, and we invest about $18 million annually into children's programs and into schools. The Skillman Foundation, when we were first founded, we were a very traditional foundation, meaning that we kind of sat in the ivory tower. We waited on people to come to us and propose projects and ideas to us, and that we would then take those ideas and invest in them and wait and see what the community could do. Well, we no longer behave or act like that. The Skillman Foundation is an embedded foundation, and what that means to me is that we are neighbors. We live here, we're not going anywhere. So it is important to us that we invest all of our resources in this community, and that not only we think about the financial investments that we make into these communities, but that we also use our human capital investments, that we want to use our social and reputational capital into these communities with our neighbors to make them better. So our entire investment is really about investing in the power of the people in the city of Detroit. So we invest in how we help residents make their neighborhoods safer, how we invest in community leaders so that they can have a voice and create the destiny for this city. We invest in education because we believe that although children are only 30% of our current population, they are 100% of the future population in this city. So if we're going to recover, it's going to be because we invested in children and that they're highly educated and capable of being prepared for school, being prepared for college, being prepared for work, but most importantly, being prepared to create businesses so that the city's prosperity will continue. And then the last area we invest in is social innovation. We want to make sure that we're giving everybody in this community an opportunity to dream big, think big, and create new ideas that are going to solve the problems that we face today. Well, I think that one of our biggest challenges in our community is that we don't really recognize the talent that exists within our neighborhoods throughout the city of Detroit. And so when the Skillman Foundation made its investments in neighborhoods, one of the first things that we recognized was that we have to spend our investments if we want them to be sustainable, that we had to invest in the natural leaders, the natural helpers and communities, to give them voice, to remind them that they do have a say about the destiny of our city, that they could be involved, and that their work matters and that it counts. So as a foundation, we've invested tremendous amount of resources in helping them build leadership skills, giving them resources so that they can sustain and run small programs in their communities. One of my favorite examples is of a woman by the name of Kathy Aska. Kathy in the Brightmoor neighborhood is an amazing community leader. Now, she may not have recognized herself as that, but one of the things she would do as this community leader was that she ran a youth development program, a youth program after school for kids. Now, she didn't describe it as that, but when 30 kids show up at your house every single day and you feed them and you tutor them and you create a safe place for them to play after school, you're running a youth program as a community leader. And I think that there are thousands of Kathy Askas across the city of Detroit, and that's why the Skillman Foundation invests in community leadership, And that's why we believe that everyone in this community is going to have to invest in community leadership if we want a recovery in the city of Detroit that's going to be inclusive and reflective of all Detroiters. I think that Detroit, as a city, has experienced pretty significant challenges. And I think we're on the brink of recovery. But in order for us to truly recover, we're going to have to deal with truth and reconciliation. That means that we have to create a space of dialogue where we tell our stories and that we listen to each other's stories and that we acknowledge each other's truth. And then once we can make it through that and deal with the healing that we need to do as a city, then I then believe we can really create a vision for what the next 50 years looks like. And I think Detroit 67 creates that opportunity for us to do so as a city. I think one of the most important messages that will come out of this exhibit and come out of the dialogue for Detroit 67 is that Detroit is not broken because of the people who stayed. Detroit is broken because of the people who left. And that in order for us to repair our city and restore our prosperity, it is going to be because we bring those who have stayed, those that are coming, and those who have left together to recreate the vision for who we are going to be. I think that there is a lot of positive energy in Detroit, and I think that that is symbolic of the change that we're seeing in attitudes and in culture. So one of the things that I think is just absolutely amazing is that when the Skillman Foundation started working on neighborhoods over 10 years ago, we were the only men and women standing on this issue. And today you see so many people making investments. So almost every philanthropy is investing in neighborhoods. And you also have business communities talking about how we must invest in neighborhoods and how we must have an inclusive recovery. So the Chamber did its most recent policy conference that was focused on neighborhoods. These are things that actually never happened in the city of Detroit. The notion that we have to recover and it has to be an inclusive and a total recovery for the city of Detroit. Usually we only talk about Detroit in a set of discrete neighborhoods. Now we're talking about all of Detroit. And I think that is hopeful. Now we have to make sure that that message gets spread out to everyone so everyone understands and believes that together we can win. One of the things that I think is so amazing about the Detroit 67 project is that it's not a project that exists inside of a museum. It is a living project that's going to be all across the city. They're going to do projects inside of neighborhoods. They're going to engage all kinds of Detroiters and create opportunities for Detroiters that live inside of the city or who live inside of the region to work together to solve problems. And I think that's an amazing accomplishment. And I think it's going to be a proof point again for our city in terms of just making a difference and knowing that we can accomplish great things if we do it together. I think Detroit is at a crossroads. It's a tale of two cities. And we often hear people talk about it as an old Detroit and a new Detroit. And I would just like to offer a couple of thoughts about that. First, I think there is a legacy Detroit. And those legacy Detroiters have been here for a really long time. They've held the city together. They have seen so much decline. They have gone through such tremendous challenges. And they've been resilient. And they're in a state where they really believe that and see what has left. They are not in necessarily a position to see what is coming. And then you have this new Detroit. And these are people with lots of energy and they see lots of opportunity and they come into Detroit and they see the assets that remain and they want to take advantage of those assets. And they're creating businesses, they're creating social activities that create a new energy in the side of Detroit. The challenge is that these two entities are working in silos. They're working in parallel and they're not connecting with each other. And it's my belief that if we're really gonna be a recovered Detroit, that we have to have legacy Detroiters and new Detroiters working together and that we create this frame about Detroit being our Detroit, not the old Detroit or the new Detroit. It has to be one Detroit. If we don't focus on bringing legacy Detroiters and new Detroiters together to create a one Detroit, then I think and I fear that what we will create is a segregated community, that we will recreate the segregation that we've seen in our region, and we will also see a segregation, economic segregation that we've seen in almost every other American city that has gone through troubles, like New York City, Seattle, Boston. Detroit doesn't have to be like them. Detroit can create the model community in our recovery, and our Detroit is the frame to do so. One of the things that I'm most amazed about in the city of Detroit is during this time of great hopefulness is that if you dig deep enough into neighborhoods and communities, that you find that children and young people and families have not yet to experience that hope. And I think that Detroit 67 has an opportunity to break open this kind of despair that exists in our community for populations that have not had voice and do not have a anchoring in the economic growth that's happening in the city. So I think that Detroit 67, as it's going into neighborhoods, as it's going into boardrooms, as it's going into central places in the city, that it creates an opportunity for people to really open up the conversation about what has happened in our past, what led up to the risings of 67, what has happened since. And now that we're at this place of a 50-year anniversary, what is to come? And I think that if we can create vision and create opportunity for people to really think about, be inspired about what can come, who we will be, then I think that Detroit 67 will do the city a great, great blessing. I'm often struck by the dichotomous conversations that we have in Detroit. It's either black or white, it's downtown or neighborhoods, it's poor or rich, it's either you're right or you're wrong. And neither of those answers are right. It's somewhere in the middle that you really get to truth. It's in that middle where you begin to interpret and break down challenges and problems and understand various perspectives, and you bring those back together that you can create a solution. And I believe that Detroit 67 has the power to create that kind of dialogue in our community. And that's why the Skillman Foundation is supportive of this effort. Today, we have an opportunity to make a 50-year play. And in order to be successful and prosperous as a city in 50 years, it means that we have to invest in the children today. And so the children that we're thinking about, the Skillman Foundation is thinking about investing for, advocating for right now, will be the parents of the children who will exist in 50 years. So if we want this city to be good for those children, then we have to make it a good city for the children today. And so the Skillman Foundation's role is really to be an advocate, a voice for children, to bring truth and light to the issues that children are facing. I think many of us in our city, in our region, and quite honestly in the country, don't understand the conditions that children in the city of Detroit are facing. And I find it a privilege and quite honestly an honor to be able to bring truth to that and to encourage people to actually invest, not in a charitable way, to invest in a transformational way. And the Skillman Foundation can do that with our investments as well, but we need others to do that if Detroit 2067 is going to be a great place to live. One of the most interesting things about Detroit's recovery is that we are identifying a set of people in our community who are civic leaders, and we're pointing to them and saying, see, they are the ones who are going to save Detroit. Well, I have news for you. They aren't saving Detroit. I'm not saving Detroit. It's the people of Detroit who are going to save Detroit. And if we're not making investments in them, if corporations aren't coming outside of their businesses, if foundations aren't investing in high-heeled organizations and going to the grassroots, if the civic and political leaders are not listening to the people and creating solutions that are going to respond to them, there is no saving of Detroit because you're not engaging the people who are purposely equipped to save it. And that's the residents in the city and the citizens of our city. Detroit was one of the richest cities in the world. And the reason that it was a rich place, not only financially, but culturally and socially, and the reason that you see so much great things come out of the city of Detroit was because we had an economic base. And that economic base was driven by high quality jobs. And the reason that we faced decline years after is because those high quality jobs left the city. If we really want Detroit to recover, we have to bring them back. And I would challenge the region, I'd challenge the corporate community. How do we recreate high quality jobs in the city of Detroit across our region so that our people the citizens of this region can have a high quality life and experience, that we're growing in population instead of declining in population. And that's within our control. It's about not spending, it's about investing. How are we investing in building the economic infrastructure that's going to benefit us today, but benefit generations to come? This is not the time for any of us to sit on the sidelines. This is the time for all of us to be on the front lines, that we are all bringing what we can to improve our city and to improve our region. This is the time for people who live in Troy, people who live in Novi, to come and to create part of the future of the city of Detroit, because their existence can't be great if Detroit's existence isn't great. So I would encourage all of us to really engage and contribute the way you can. Contribute through your church, contribute through your volunteerism, contribute through opening businesses here, contribute through working and getting to know residents in the city of Detroit. Contribute by talking about race. Talk about race. It is nothing wrong with race. We have some barriers in this community that are preventing us from moving forward, and most of them get down to race and class. And until we talk about those things and begin to solve for how we want to address them as a community, there is no growth for us. There is no recovery for us. There is no prosperity for us. And that's what we all want together, and that's the only way we're gonna get it, is if we talk about these issues that divide us and put them to bed so that we can now talk about the things that will grow us as a community. Part of the reason that I think that truth and reconciliation is important is because we learn this across the world, right? When you look at South Africa, the reason that South Africa is in a position right now where it's prospering from the most racially divided time in its history is because they've dealt with race, they've dealt with truth, and they've dealt with reconciliation. And Detroiters have to do that. If we think that we're gonna skate over the issues of race and class and that we're gonna recover without doing that, we are wrong. The people in this city are hurt. The people in this city are broken because of the things that we've done to each other, and we don't really know why we've done them or how they've impacted each other. So this is not about blaming one group or pitting another group against another. This is really about saying it is time for us to have the hard and crucial conversations for us to move forward. And the way that we do that is by understanding each other, knowing each other, and purposely and intentionally creating opportunities for everybody to be included in our recovery. If we are in rooms where there are only white people in the room, and 2 or 3 black people sprinkled and maybe a couple of Asians, that's the wrong room. We have to be able to challenge each other and say, we gotta be more inclusive. We have to make sure that everybody's in the room. We want everybody to have a seat at the table. We don't want people sitting on the outsides of the table, and we don't want it to invite people to the table where they're sitting in a broken chair or a folding chair. Everybody in this community, every race, every diverse community, every diverse economic community has to have a say in what the city looks like. They have to be at the table, they have to have permanent seating, and they have to be able to get close to a microphone so that their voices are echoed just as powerfully as those who are leading our city. So I'm a Detroiter. I grew up in this city, actually went to 10 different schools over 13 years. Can you believe that? It's unimaginable. But I think my background is very similar to the kids today, where there was a lot of transiency for a lot of different reasons. But I was able to get a high quality education, and I was able to pursue my dreams. I believe that it's our responsibility as a community to make sure that there are other children who are just like Tonya Allen, in some cases who have had worse experiences, and in some cases who have had stronger experiences, that they too can pursue their dreams and they too can fulfill their purposes. And I think that we can do that if we invest together and dream together. I grew up in this city, and I've seen this city decline. I remember 2006. I remember such a crucial time when literally our city was on its knees. And I also remember when people that we don't know, who are nameless and faceless, who have worked together behind the scenes in dark rooms trying to bring the city back. And we see that it's happening. If we can continue that kind of energy and make sure that that energy is inclusive of all, we can have the greatest comeback story ever.